Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat teaching by Rabbi Rebecca Schatz.
We are going to talk a little bit about Joseph, and we're going to specifically talk about Joseph and Joseph's emotional being. We are not going to talk about what I'm about to tell you, which is that lots of people, including Midrash, but lots of modern day sources are interested and I would venture to say obsessed at times with the fact that Joseph is very effeminate, which really shouldn't matter. But I think that in terms of the other patriarchs that we've seen before him and even some that come after him, the way in which Joseph is described is often not as our male patriarchs are described before him. And so there's lots of midrash and lots of talk around his effeminate personality traits. So some of them are emotions, some of them are looks, some of them have to do with just how he is with his family and his children to come, but also his brothers.
He listened.
He what?
He listened.
He listened, right, exactly. Lots of stereotypes at play here. We're not going to talk about that. But the reason I bring it up is because what we are going to focus in on is that Joseph is a really emotional guy, which personally, as a non-male myself, but as someone who is surrounded by lots of brothers and lots of cousins who are male, there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing that says that men cannot be emotional. In fact, I think it's a sign of strength, not weakness. And so the stereotypes around gender and emotion play very much into how the rabbis then describe what this emotion was about. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about his gender, and we're not going to talk about whether or not he was an effeminate character or not, because again, I don't really know that matters, nor do I personally care too much. But we are going to talk about his emotional state and what does that do to the story, and what does that do to our understanding of Joseph, but also our understanding of his relational connection to the other people around him. And we're going to hear a lot about what the rabbis have to say about his emotional outbursts, of which there are more than one. AJ, you have a question already?
No, comment, wasn't it? Well, it is a question. I'm afraid of the question.
Okay.
Wasn't it really about just, are they getting this from the statements like he favored his mother, that i.e. he reminded his father of his mother?
We're not going to see that too much because it's going to be talking about his emotional state in regard to his brothers. But I'm sure that is a place where it started. Let's take one per every two people, because I don't think I printed enough, which is a great problem to have on Sudashli sheet. But if we just take one for every two people, as long as you can see it, that's great. Okay, so this is Parashat Vayigash, right? We just read this part of the Torah just a few moments ago, thanks to Rabbi Berenbaum. We're going to read through kind of chunks of the story here. So we're going to skip a few verses here and there, but first we're going to start at the beginning of chapter 45. V'lo yachol Yosef lehitapek lechol hanitzavim alav v'yikra hotzia kol ish me'elai v'lo amad ish ito v'hit vada Yosef elechav. So Joseph couldn't hold back his own emotions before his attendants, and he cried out, "Everyone should go away from me." So there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. So what do we already know about Joseph's emotional state here? Yeah. He's kind of like, all of this emotion has now been kept inside him for so long that it's about to boil over. And what does he not want to have happen?
Does he want everybody else to see?
Yeah, he's embarrassed.
But it's not only that, but if you look at the Hebrew, it's the equivalent in what we say in English, may I have the room?
Right, correct. So So Rabbi Berenbaum's pointing out that he doesn't actually say that he's embarrassed. We read that into this. He's basically just saying, like, let me have my space, let me have the room, and asks the attendants to leave his side. I'm going to continue this next part in in the English because we're not going to focus as much on any of the Hebrew words here. His sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear, and so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. So what happens when he's given the room? He sobs very loudly. He starts to cry out of great emotion boiling over. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still well?" But his brothers could not answer him because they were so dumbfounded on account of seeing him, of knowing him. I said that we weren't going to look at the Hebrew, but I just want you to see one thing very quickly. This piece here, Vayomer Yosef Elechav, Geshuna Elai, Vaigashu, and so they're using the same word here, right? That Joseph wants them to come towards to him, and then they actually come forward. But they're doing exactly what he's asking. They're in such a state of inability to kind of make their own decisions. They're in such shock that they're doing exactly what they're told, right? So that's the point. Yeah, Irv?
I think they're very scared.
Okay, they could be scared. Sure, they could be scared. Right, so the rabbis do wonder, are the brothers now running through their heads as to what is Joseph going to do to us? We did this terrible thing to him. Now that he knows who we are, is he out to get us? So it's possible there's a bit of fear. Alan?
Doesn't Judah tell him beforehand that my father is doing well? So why is it that Joseph now is coming back saying, "Is my father, I am Joseph, is my father's still okay"?
I think what we're going to see is that there are many moments that set up the brothers, or Joseph, but mostly the brothers, to kind of settle into the fact that this is a huge shock, right? So I don't know that any of these questions are really questions that are asked in a way to gain knowledge or be given what's the word I'm looking for?
If you check the last time, that was with a time lapse. In other words, with your father being very old, time lapse, he said that they used the excuse before Benjamin came down.
Right, but he's correct that he's correct that the question's already been asked.
They used the excuse before Benjamin came down. They've since gone back to Canaan. They brought back Benjamin. The question is the father still alive? And that's a legitimate question without a specific answer, because time has lapsed.
I somehow thought
Right.
it was still very recently, not just back there. I thought it was
Very
another.
recent.
If every conversation of which I was a part, people asked the question once and once only, my conversations would be much shorter.
Right, so I think time lapse or no time lapse, right? It has already been asked, and I think the point that's being made within this particular scenario is that the question is now being asked again, not only to check in on his father, but to also ease the brothers into being able to give over information to their brother who has now been revealed to them, revealed to them. So I think you're all right? It did happen before already. The question was already asked. We have no idea how much time lapsed, but it was an amount of time. That being said, I think that what's happening here, and you're going to see this in the next paragraph as well, is that questions are being wondered and asked and repeated in a way that is creating a sense of comfort, not necessarily gaining knowledge or intel is the word I was looking for before. AJ, do you have a hand up?
I was agreeing with Michael that there's a statement in there about the lack of food. So they now have a reason they need to go back.
Mm-hmm.
So that implies a time lapse.
Correct.
More than just travel time, but also...
Yeah.
They're also going to answer a question. One presumes they're going to answer a question fundamentally differently when, the Prime Minister of Egypt asks it than when their brother asks it.
Sure,
Right?
sure.
You're going to speak to that person differently.
Sure, and right, yes, very good. Okay, I'm not gonna comment on every single piece, or we're gonna be here for forever. Okay, so this last piece, and when they came forward, the brothers, he said, "I am your brother Joseph." he whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be distressed or reproach yourself because you sold me. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. Now, what that part of the sentence means is that in just a moment, Joseph's going to say, see, this is why I came first, because I needed to make sure that I could get grain and food and all these things so I could give it to you when you are out of them. But the reason that this statement is made again, right, that he is his brother, is because it's a shock. Right, they are in shock right now that this is their brother, and he wants to make sure that they know that it's going to be okay. He knows who they are, they know who he is, it's going to be okay. Right? It's going to take some time, but it's going to be okay.
Also revealed a piece of information, which is a confirming piece of information. In other words,
that there was a reason?
If he was faking it, then he would not have known that the brother...
Sure.
If Joseph was not Joseph, he would not have known that he had been sold into slavery by his brother.
Sure, right. So he's...
Brothers are taking that
Yeah.
as, oh my God, this really is Joseph.
Right. It's similar actually to the Judah and Tamar piece where, right, there's evidence to show this is really exactly who this person is. Let me just show you, let me just tell you. So without this piece of evidence, it's possible they still wouldn't have believed him and continued to be in shock. Okay, let's go to this next piece here. So again, this is going to be, the next sentence here is the reason that he just said that God sent me ahead of you. There I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine to come, that you and your household and all that is yours may not suffer. You can see for yourselves and my brother Benjamin for himself that it is indeed I who am speaking to you. Now, here's the piece, here's the second kind of emotional piece that we're going to look at. Vayipol al tzav'arei Binyamin achiv, vayavek, uVinyamin bacha al tzav'arav. So with that, he falls, it says embraced here, but he falls onto the neck of Benjamin, his brother, and he cries. And Benjamin cries on the neck of Joseph. So they're in a very intimate embrace, both crying, one on the other's neck. Okay, can you picture that? Okay, great. Vayenashek lechol echa vayevk. And so then he, meaning Joseph, goes around kissing all of his brothers and cries. But it says vayevk alehem, and he cries onto them or on them, right? So does that mean that he's hugging all of them? Does that mean that he's crying because he sees who they are and he's crying kind of on behalf of all of them? And after that, they were able to talk to him, to talk to Joseph. The news reached Pharaoh's palace. Joseph's brothers have come, and Pharaoh and his courtiers were pleased. I think that's such a sweet moment that Pharaoh can be happy for Joseph and his brothers, right? That there's this overwhelming joy that even if this means for Pharaoh, we don't yet know, but even if this could mean for Pharaoh that things are going to be more complicated, Pharaoh really cares enough about Joseph to want this moment for him, to want this emotional embrace and love from his brothers to be present and to continue to uplift him. So far we've seen this moment where Joseph's emotions are bubbling up within him. He asks for the room. He cries a lot. Then he specifically has this moment with Benjamin, and then he has another crying moment with all of the brothers. Right? So far there are 3 moments where there's a lot of emotion coming out of Joseph, and then also out of his brothers as well, but a lot of emotion pent up that is now being revealed in their coming together. So the last sentence from Torah that we're going to look at before we look at some commentaries is Vayomer Yosef, sorry, can't read it. Merkavto v'ya'al likrat Yisrael aviv Goshna, meaning towards Goshen, vayira elav vayipol tzavarav vayevk al tzavarav od. So then this is the moment, this is many, many verses later, even a whole chapter later, where Joseph then does reunite with his father, and then he goes up to his father and he hugs him, again, around his neck, which if you read, I didn't want to go in the direction of why the neck. It didn't seem like such an interesting class. But the neck is known to be this very intimate way of hugging someone or embracing someone, right, according to the rabbis. So that's why neck is constantly mentioned here. Also strength. So embraced him around the neck, and then he weeps on his neck, and it says od, meaning just like on and on and on and on for a long while, it says in the English, but more than he had before. Okay. So this is what we're working with so far. A very, I think, reasonably emotional encounter, coming back into family, having a person who's been through a lot in his life, being able to show emotion, not necessarily wanting to show that emotion to his kind of, quote, just friends at the beginning, but then once with family, able to very much reveal that emotion. Okay. Any questions, thoughts, comments before we go into the commentary? Okay. Last week I introduced this commentary that I think is such a wonderful thing to have on Sefaria. So the women's commentary is now on Sefaria and has been good to me the past 2 weeks in terms of what it has to say. So I'm glad to be able to share it. So the exact moment that this particular piece is referencing is the third time that Joseph weeps with emotion over his brothers. The Hebrew root for cry, which is bet chaf hey, is often used also for female emotional distress, with a prominent example being the imagined weeping of Joseph's mother, Rachel. So to go back to that point, AJ, that you made, for her lost children after the destruction of the northern tribes of Israel. And then the commentary goes on to say, this is the fourth time then that Joseph weeps over his brother, and he also weeps when he reunites with his father. So I just combined all those commentaries together, and all these different places of the Torah, this commentary is pointing out the fact that this is unique for us to be seeing a man have this reaction, but a beautiful one, and makes a lot of sense given why he's doing it. Yes?
Would you consider Joseph shy? As in the start when you started talking, you said that it says that he wanted some space for pride. Wouldn't that be considered shy?
That's a really great question. Do you think that he was shy? Does that imply shyness to you, do you think?
Kind of.
Yeah.
But I'm asking, would that be considered? That actually mean that he was very shy?
That is very intuitive. I think that he was probably shy, and I think maybe even a little bit embarrassed, but not in a bad way. Like he had never seen anybody have this kind of emotion around him. So sometimes when you're young and you haven't yet experienced someone having that kind of emotion around you, you're worried, am I supposed to react this way? Is this what I'm supposed to do? Right? And so maybe it is a little bit of shyness. I think that's a very intuitive way of reading this. And maybe it's that he just wasn't so sure. Am I supposed to have this emotion only in private, or can I share it with other people? It's a really great question. So we're going to go to the Chizkuni, because you all kind of commented on the same thing that Rashi commented on, that the brothers were amazed because they were shameful that what they had done towards Joseph. So Chizkuni then says they were frightened of him, of what he might do, right, out of revenge because of what they did to their brother. Now that he's said, oh, this is who I am, and he's this big hotshot, now what? Now what's going to come to us, right? Chizkuni goes on to say that al tzavarai, like around the neck, around his neck, meaning both sides of the neck, because the word neck here is in the plural. So what's interesting about this, and the reason I left it in here, is that you can hug someone and just kind of be on like one side of their neck. Do you know what I mean? We could do a little show and tell if people want to. But it is possible that you are just relating to one side of a person's neck. What they're trying to get at here is that it was such an intimate moment that the embrace was around the neck as well as the crying, meaning using both sides of this person's neck, in this case, Joseph to Benjamin, to be able to kind of overly emote, right? To really like fall into the neck of his brother. And so that's why it's plural, which is really interesting. We don't have two necks. We only have one neck. But being able to play on this both sides of a strong part of our bodies.
Let's give it a different scenario.
Okay.
Let's assume Joseph was not mature enough to do this. What could he have done in that situation? He could have said, you so-and-so with a couple of vulgarities made fun of me
Yeah.
when I said that 11 grams would
Right.
go down to mine.
Right.
Look who's
Yeah.
talking now.
100%. 100%.
He could have lorded over them. He said,
Yes.
Now I got you guys.
Sure.
I know siblings who would have easily behaved.
And I think he kind of does.
All of us would have been tempted.
Right. Well, I think you're right, and I think that he does do that in a sort of way by saying, I told you about that dream. God put me here before you, and I tried to tell you all that this was happening, but then you did away with me, right? So he doesn't do it as dramatically as you, Rabbi Birnbaum, suggested that it might happen, but I do think that there is part of him that's a little bit spiteful and trying to say to them, like, hello, I tried to give you this ahead of time, and no one listened to me, and now here we are outliving this dream that I did have. Yes, Rabbi Green.
Of course.
Yeah.
There's the one dream with the stalks of wheat, and that dream in a certain sense is fulfilled. The second dream, where the sun and the moon and the stars bow down to him, the 11 stars representing his brothers bow down, but he never has that interaction with his parents. And so if we're going to argue that there's a fulfillment of one dream, there's also the caveat that there's another dream that's unfulfilled and unfulfillable.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up because I think I left this commentary in here. Yes, the last commentary that we'll look at, don't look at it now. Stevie, don't look at it. I know who looks at things before it. The last commentary that we'll look at is going to actually talk about the fact that not connected to the dream specifically, but connected to this point of shouldn't Joseph have had a little bit more humility towards his father and not expected his father to kind of bow to him and do something that put Joseph above him, but rather shouldn't he have bowed to his father? And so though it doesn't reference the dream, it is a similar rhetoric to that. Okay. All right, let's just do a few more. Do you have a question, Marlise?
I was just going to say that previously he had told the brothers to go back and bring back Benjamin, so he was using his power in the way you could think that maybe he was trying to get at them because of get back at them.
Yeah, I don't know that getting them to bring Benjamin back was definitely was a power move in that he had the power to request it. I don't know that it was a move that was trying to assume power over them in like a malicious way. I think it was really him wanting to make sure that all of the siblings, including the sibling who he's closest to because they were both born to the same mother, was okay. What?
Dangerous test, though.
What was?
The dangerous test was he was testing his brothers that they wouldn't turn on Benjamin. And it's a dangerous test because if they had turned on Benjamin, he had no control over that.
True. Yeah. It's interesting. Okay. Let's look at. We're gonna look at Radak. We're gonna skip the first Rabbeinu Bachia. Look at the Radak here. It says Vayipol, right? So this moment where he fell on them. Seeing that Joseph and Binyamin were full brothers, the bond between them was stronger. So they cried one after the other. So what Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi, is getting at here is that Benjamin is taken out. Sure. It's isolated from the others, not the word I was looking for, but taken aside from the other brothers because they had this specific bond where he felt like he could emote in a way that was going to be a stronger emotional reaction to Benjamin than to the other brothers. Do you have another comment?
Do you want to share?
No? Okay. Okay, so go to Hamek Davar. So he kissed all of his brothers. This is once he had the interaction with Benjamin, now he's going to have the interaction with the rest of the brothers. And he kissed all his brothers and cried on them. And after that, that's the verse, that he saw them terrified when they saw that the dreams came true per his prophecy. And that they thought, after this, maybe Joseph interprets the dream of 11 stars, there's a typo, bowing to him as a permanent state, that God decreed them all his slaves in perpetuity. After this, they could not speak to him face to face, but he showed them by kissing them and crying as one brother does over another. They understood that he interpreted his dreams as having already been fulfilled, and that he no longer believed he was their master, God forbid, and now they spoke to him. So to get back to what Rabbi Green said, but also in general of this, like, why emotion? Why is emotion helpful here? There is a certain moment where Joseph feels like he needs something beyond just his words to be able to show everything's gonna be okay. It's gonna be fine. I still feel connected to you. I still have this bond to you as my brothers. Everything is going to be okay. So even though the brothers were interpreting dreams still, or at least thinking back to the fact that there were dreams to interpret, Joseph is emoting, and I don't think that it's not genuine. I think that he's doing it out of full emotion coming forth from a long time of keeping it inside. But that emotion helps them see the genuine personality and also love, though that doesn't say it here, the genuine connection that he feels to his brothers. And that emotion allows that connection to be seen. Stevie?
I mean, I think Davar is getting at the sense of, like, is this power imbalance something that you're striving for, or something that you're striving to put behind you?
Who's the
Yosef,
you?
I guess, in this case, or the brother's perception of Yosef.
Yeah.
That he's saying that until this point, they always looked at Yosef as someone who was dreaming of the day when, I just can't wait to be king. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Lion King. That's good. Yeah.
And
good reference.
Now that he's crying with them, it's like, oh, he's actually, like, we've been there, we've done that, he's past that, and, like, the brothers perceive him as saying, like, we're going to try to get past this imbalance and strive towards a healthier sort of relationship.
Yeah. I think that's very possible, and I do wonder if the emotion in there is allowing the brothers to see him as just another guy, as opposed to in that powerful position, and allows them to kind of all strike a balance that they've never had before and level that playing field, even if he still is in a position of power, but to still level that field. That's a really beautiful read. Okay. We're going to read 1.5 more. We're not going to read the whole Ramban, but I want to read Radak. So this is again commenting on Vayavek Alehem. By the way, I want to point out that finding commentaries on the crying was very, very, very hard to do. Lots of the rabbis did not want to talk about the crying or weren't interested in the crying. So even though there's a lot on this page, I didn't not include lots of other things that I found. This is most of what I found on the crying, which also just shows, right, like how interested our rabbis were in the fact that this was what one of our leaders was doing in his as his character. Okay, Vayavek Alehem, but the brothers did not cry, being too ashamed to do so. V'chareki dvaro achav ito. But seeing that he had wept, meaning Joseph, and kissed them, they knew that he did not harbor a grudge against them, and they now asked him about what happened to him during all the years since he had left his father's house. So again, a moment for Rabbi Kimchi to say, okay, we've broken a barrier. We've broken that fourth wall, right? There's a certain element here where we are now very much a part of your story. Let's have a good cry. Let's get this all out, and then let's talk about it. And let's talk about it as siblings, not as powerful ruler and people who are dying in a famine, right? So that it allowed them to all feel something together and collectively and be able to move from that space. Okay, we're going to finish with the Ramban, and we're not going to read the whole thing, so I'm going to jump around. Joseph appeared before his father, and he wept on his neck a good while. Jacob, however, did not fall upon the neck of his son Joseph, nor did he kiss him. Our rabbis said that this was because he was reciting the Shema. Moreover, it is not respectful for Joseph to fall upon his father's neck. He should rather bow before him or kiss his hands. Right? So this is saying, okay, you might be a really emotional guy, and this might be a really emotional moment, but you still need to have reverence and kavod and honor for your father in such a way that you aren't blubbering in front of him, but rather are showing him reverence in these other ways. In modern day, of course, we would read this and say, what a sweet reaction, right? To fall into your old father's neck, lap, whatever, and be able to say, I'm so happy to see you. What a sweet reaction. But the rabbis didn't think so, but okay. The correct interpretation appears to me, meaning Nachmanides, to be that Israel's eyes were already slightly dim from age. His father did not recognize him. His brothers also had not recognized him. Therefore, Torah mentions that when he appeared before his father, who stared at him and then finally recognized him, his father fell on his neck and cried again over him, even as he had continually cried over him to this day when he had not seen him after his disappearance. So the reason I think this commentary is so interesting is because there's a lot of like caveats, right? We can't just say, wow, what a sweet moment, a father and son reuniting after so much time. He thought he was dead. He mourned him. Midrash says that he didn't fully mourn him because he believed he was still alive. But in the Torah, he cries for him a lot. He really mourns his child. And yet the rabbis have to kind of qualify why all of this might be happening and why in this way and why not in that way, and was it respectful, was it not respectful? So I wanted to bring this particular part of this story to us because I think as the Torah moves through this story, we recognize more humanity, and also not just humanity in a people are flawed and there are moments of strife way, but also in character, right? In character, we see this emotion come through in a way that we do not see it with any other characters in this powerful of a way. There's other moments of crying, of course, in our Torah. Joseph really has a story that evolves over many parshiot for us to see a moment of being thrown down, being brought up, being broken down, and then being in a moment of power, but having a vulnerable side of him where he can still show that emotion towards family that he cares for. So I hope that in finishing the story of Joseph this week, we can all think of the ways in which we are a little bit like Joseph, and the ways in which the people in our families are a little bit like Joseph, and be proud of this character. It's one of my favorite stories in the Torah, and I'm always sad to leave it behind every year. But I think there's power in recognizing how he is a little bit like us, especially as we leave him to go on to Moshe.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.